Hello and welcome to my second Maddening tier list for Fire Emblem Engage. This is without DLC. This is after 400 hours of playtime, so let's just jump into it. All right, Alchrist. I would say Alchrist is A tier. Some people put him higher or lower. The arguments for him going higher are that he's insane on a Speed Taker build, and he can one run with Luna consistently on Brave Bow, and potentially Silver Bow and things like this. This is true. It's definitely a high level of investment. I put him at A tier, assuming you're just kind of running him normally, just using him as an archer. Some people argue he's lower, but I think if you make use of Luna, even at a basic level, he's like his lowest is an A tier. For Alir, I'm going to say high A tier. Alir does require special treatment to get up and running. Once they do, I would say they become a borderline S tier unit, but because you have to hyper focus so much XP early game into them before they pop off, I would say they're an A. Now, they are a force deploy and they do have decent growths, but they don't kind of naturally pop off on their own. You kind of have to force feed them and create situations where they start to level up faster. And for that reason, I don't think they belong in S. Alfred, I would say, honestly, he's like D or C tier. He's borderline unusable. He's very weak. His growths aren't necessarily bad, but his bases are bad, and it takes forever for him to start getting online. And his accuracy is also quite poor. And he's one of these early game units that if you invest a lot in, they'll become like a C or maybe a B tier at most. But other units just join your team and they're just already good. So he has a lot of friction in the way of getting him to a point where he's like relevant or decent. So I think D tier is fair. Amber is either high C or low B. So I'm actually running Amber right now on my 5th run, and he does have really good strength growth, and he has good bases. So he could potentially be one of the best halberdiers in the game. So if he pops off on halberdier, I might bump him up to A. But if he just is a decent halberdier, then I'll just leave him in B. But I would say he's best on halberdier or warrior, and he's just a decent unit. And you can also run crit builds on him to some degree. Anna, I would say, is S tier. Of the two pupils, she's much easier to get going. She starts out at level 5, and as long as you have a basic plan for getting her to level 10 quickly, she can be put on warrior and then second sealed into Sage by chapter 9 consistently. So all you have to do if you want to easily level her up, don't do Jean's paralog. Do Anna's paralog first, get Anna, put Micaiah on her, have her heal villagers on Jean's paralog, which you'll be now over leveled for, and she can easily hit level 9 by the end of this, hit level 10 on chapter 7 or 8, and then master seal her into warrior, second seal her into sage, mage knight, or high priest. All of these have pros and cons. Sage is the best damage, but medium speed. Mage knight is slightly less damage, but better build and better speed. And high priest is highest luck growth, but worst offensive stats. So if you want to go for gold, you can have her last hit on High Priest. If you want to go for medium build, and also Byleth poke, where she uses Thyrsus on Byleth to hit enemies from really far away, and you can dance her, and she's a siege weapon. That can be really good. And then on Mage Knight, she's just a solid like damage with good speed. Boucheron, I would say he's actually like B. He's actually not terrible. If you run him at a basic level and just fix his accuracy, hand him a compact axe, like +2 or +3, get its accuracy up. He's pretty consistent early game. And if you throw him on warrior, he can master seal directly into it. He's not bad. He can shoot down flyers, and he has pretty high build and pretty decent speed. It's yet to be seen, at least in my own playthroughs, how he pops off or doesn't mid to end game. But right now on warrior, by chapter 10 on my 5th run, he seems fine. He seems like he could be good. Bunet, I'm going to put in D tier. He's basically a great knight with low speed and low defense. He doesn't really do anything that other units can't do better, and there's really no reason to run him. Saline, I would say she's like high B tier. She has low speed, even though her speed growth is decent, and she tends to have kind of medium damage and medium speed, so she never really pops off. Some people overinvest in her early, look with like Levin sword and stuff like this, but arguably it's not really worth it. There's better things to do. Chloe, I would say, is an easy S tier. With minimal investment, she pops off, and then she stays popping off. So here are 2 easy ways to run Chloe. The first thing is you just use her normally. She just gets kills as she needs to, and then you master seal her into Griffin Knight, and then she starts to power level herself from getting kills and doubling on Griffin Knight 'cause it's very fast with a Steel Lance, and also healing because Griffin Knight has access to staves, so she can obstruct, she can heal, she can restore. All of these are free XP on turns that she can't kill something or attack something. So she's really good at power leveling and snowballing herself. And the other way to use her is you just use her normally and then put her on Wyvern. Wyvern gives her higher strength and a little bit more build. It also gives her better strength growth so that as she enters middle and late game, she has higher strength. And she still has a very impressive 60% speed growth on Wyvern. On Griffin, she has 75% speed growth. So Griffin is faster but less damaging. Wyvern is slower but more damaging. And Griffin also has utility, and Wyvern has flexibility because it has access to 2 weapons. So you could run Lance Axe if you want the more damage, or you could run Lance Sword if you want things like Armor Slayer or Levin Sword. Yeah, so she has some pretty good builds. Early game, she's one of the best damage units. Like there's like objectively, she has the highest speed, and if you throw her on Wyvern or Griffin early, she will pop off better than other units and will consistently one round most things. And she can also enemy phase tank like 3 to 5 things at a time and kill, like she'll one round them on counterattack or just put like insane damage on them. So she's actually one of the best early game units by a huge margin. It's not even close. All right. Citrine, I would say, is B tier for her Thunder build or for just like Thoron poking with like Ike or something. And you can also use Momentum on Thoron poke, and it's, you know, it scales the damage by around 5 because that's her move on Sage. She can also get damage scaling from extra tome users on Sage. So her main thing is Thoron poking or Siege toming with Dire Thunder. So that's her main thing. Now you do have to kind of exploit the game to get the Dire Thundering, but I did read something on forums and I tested it and it's true. So as soon as you get Leaf, enter the next mission, leave, and then create, I think, like 10 to 20 bond rings and you'll get it. And that worked for me. So, or no, I'm sorry, I created 30. Yeah. So if that's like a guaranteed way, as far as I know. It might be, or it might not be correct though. It might just have randomly worked out, but that worked for me. So I don't know if that's a guaranteed way of producing that ring. But you can save scum to get that. But even with that thing, I think that just makes her decent. So I don't think it makes her... Like the thing with Anna is, like Anna on Sage can double a lot of enemies. And if you just run like Speed Taker on her, or if you just give her some speed and run Byleth, she can do exactly what Citrine can do, but she can just double naturally and hit harder because investing in Thunder as a tome, it falls off mid-game. So like mid to late game, it starts to deal less and less damage. But like if you can double with Bolganon, or like a Levin Sword, that's much stronger usually. Clan, honestly, I'm gonna put him in D tier. It's because of his it's completely his opportunity cost. It is so difficult to level this dude. I've tried to level him on 3 Maddening runs, and every single time I feed him kill after kill, and he just does not level up. He doesn't one round many things. The only thing he can one round is like armor, but he needs like L-Fire, so you have to upgrade his tome early so he can one round armor. He doesn't kill things very effectively. He does deal decent damage, but he just levels up so slow, and he starts off at such a low level that it's legitimately difficult to get him to level up. He is level 9 by chapter 10 on my 5th Maddening run, and I have been intentionally setting up kills for him and feeding him, and he still levels up so slow it's disgusting. By comparison, I have Jean, who I just had healing the entire time, and I got him as soon as his Paralog was available, and he's also level 9. So Clan starts off a few levels ahead and has a few more chapters deployed than Jean, but Jean caught up just from healing. So if you want to use Clan, you really have to bend over backwards to get him even just to hit level 10. Like it's truly difficult. It's a hurdle just to get him over level 10. And then you also have to second seal him onto physical. And unlike Anna, who you second seal onto Sage and is immediately insane in doubles and one rounds things, he will not have that effect or that impact on your team. He'll just kind of be okay. So at best, he's like a C tier, and on average, he's a D tier. Diamant, I would say he's like a solid B tier. He has decent durability, but there's other things that can do what he wants to do better. So like there's better enemy phase tanks for just general tanking. And there's things that are faster than him. There are things that are stronger than him. He's kind of like a generalist where he has just like good bases and good growths and decent stats. But he does have a low dex cap on his personal class, which does matter late game. Late game enemies have high speed, which means they have high avoid. So having low dex is difficult to play around. He does have fair fight, which helps. But the low dex, like you have to consider that each point of dex is 2 hit. So if he's stuck at like 23 dex, if he were at 30 dex, he would be like plus 20 more hit just from those 10 dex levels. So like if he was at like 33 dex versus 23, he would be plus 20 more hit. So even though he does have a decent passive, it also can kind of work against him. He basically can't run, like he can kind of run avoid tank builds, but I don't think that there's anything too stand out about him that pushes him up into A tier or S tier, or that even justifies like investing in him. But he's not bad. Like he's still good. He's still a solid unit. Etier, this is a highly contentious unit on my channel. I would say she's C tier. She is very frail. She easily gets killed by anything in the game throughout most of the game. And the only arguments that have been presented to me as to why she's good usually revolve around overinvestment early, like handing her Marth and like having her get kills with Mercurius, or handing her Sigurd and setting up specific farms to funnel XP into her. But if you just use her naturally, like if you're just playing the game normally, not like overinvesting in her, she will be on average level 6 and at best level 7 by the time the game hands you Alchrist. And Alchrist is level 10 with better bases and can tank hits. And he also has a much better passive that scales his damage by 3, gives him +3 strength anytime he's within 2 tiles of an ally that's been attacked. So even though Alchrist has slightly worse strength growth than her, he still has that +3 strength damage that's really easy to set up and play around. And he also has Luna, and he can tank hits. And tanking hits, here's the thing, you can always position better, but being able to tank hits allows you to counterattack during enemy phase. So unlike Etier, Alchrist can get hit by an enemy archer and then shoot that enemy archer. He can get hit by an enemy mage and then shoot that enemy mage. He has high enough base defense, high enough health, high enough speed where he can return fire. And he can also trigger Luna on counterattack, which is something Etier cannot do. She does not have access to Luna. So being able to tank on enemy phase, even just like tank weaker enemies like archers and mages, allows you to damage and potentially even kill them while taking some small damage yourself. So that is a huge advantage, because then you start the turn off with a dead enemy or an almost dead enemy that you can then kill. So like let's say enemy has 30 health, he does 16, right? Then next turn during player phase, he can now clean up the kill that he set up on enemy phase. So enemy phase tanking is real. It's very relevant. It's very useful to be able to do. And the fact that you have to put in work to get her just to his bases is not good. Like you can argue all day about her, but she's just not that strong of a unit in terms of stats. Fagato, I want to put him in B tier. I feel like he falls off late game. I feel like mid game to late mid game, he's really solid. But on his personal class, his strength falls off in fixed mode. Now, there are other classes for him. Someone recommended putting him on Warrior, which probably does fix his bad strength. So that probably would potentially put him into A tier. But he doesn't have anything too stand out or too different. He's basically just like a Bow Knight with some changes. His personal, it doesn't really do too much. So, back at you, I think. It's something weird. He has some weird skills that don't really... He has a really strange... Here, I'm gonna look this up right now. Cupido. Let's see, Cupido. It's a really weird... Yeah, back at you. When countering, unit may deal extra damage equals to half of damage taken, trigger percent equals dex. So that's basically bad Luna, because you have to get hit and then it does half of the damage taken and it triggers off of dex. Yeah, that's not very useful. That's not blowing me away. Fram, I would say she's high B tier. I think she's a little bit better than Saline. She actually has good speed growth, but her magic growth could be better. She's really good on Mage Knight. Well, at least I wouldn't say really good. I'd say she's decent on Mage Knight. She's passable on Mage Knight. She's not as good as Anna because she doesn't hit the insane dex growth. So like Anna, so let me just go over these bases really quick because I do have them. Fram's base growth rates. She has 25% magic, 35% dex, 55% speed, and then 25% luck. And now compare that to Anna, because these are both like similar units. Anna has 50% base magic, 50% base dex, 50% base speed, 30 or 45% luck. And also Anna has 5% build and Fram has 0. And Anna's passive makes you money. And even if you don't like prioritize Anna's passive, it'll still make you a few thousand gold throughout a run easily. At least 10 to 20k, because once she starts hitting like 20, like 15 to 25 luck, she just needs to get a few kills a map and she'll make you like 1 to 2k a map pretty easily, even without you prioritizing it. So like her base is like, she's very accurate. She's slightly slower, but she also has the build, so that makes up for it over time, because every 20 levels she'll get a point of build, which does happen. Especially if you use her, she'll get a lot of kills. But yeah, she's like a decent unit. She's fast, but I don't think she's nearly as good as the other mages. Gold Mary. I want to say Gold Mary is either high B or low A. Her tanking is okay. I don't find it to be super useful. I feel like there's better options for tanking and like not like general, but she is decent. I want to put her at high B. I think she's just a decent unit. Her defensive growth is really her standout thing. But if we go over some of her growths, you'll see why I don't place her very high. So 30% strength, 25% dex, 25% speed, and then 55% defense. She has very low growths overall. Her only good growths, she has like 65% HP, which is actually below average for damage units, for like physical units. And then she has 55 defense, which is really high. So you can put her on general. She will need like engraved weapons just to land hits because her dex growth is abysmal, 25%. She tends to have accuracy issues even on weapons that are usually pretty accurate. Her speed is so low that she's not going to be able to reasonably double or go on faster classes, so her options are very limited. But she is a solid defender. She's not bad. Hortensia, I'm going to actually put her in A tier. A lot of people put her in S, but maybe like here. But like, she has, all right, so here's what Hortensia is going for. The staff range +1 is good, and it does allow her to basically be flexible with healing. Her passive allows her to retain extra uses, like conserve uses, like staff uses, which is great on finite staves, like warp, rewarp, rescue, because you can only get so many of them before post-game. After post-game, they're infinite, but if you're actually doing a run, from chapter 1 to 26, you're going to run out of, if you spam warp staff, you're going to run out of it. Like there's only so many of them in the game. So her being able to conserve staff uses is good. Now she does have low max HP, and every time I run her, I always get Corrin max HP on her, because otherwise she gets one shot by literally anything. So she's basically like a staff utility. Her damage output is kind of on the lower side, but her speed is very high, so she tends to double enemies. So that kind of compensates for it. And I believe she cannot use Bolganon because she has B in tomes, and that requires A. So the best tomes she can use really are like an upgraded L-Fire or L-Wind or L-Surge, which are fine. You can still deal some damage. But she can be frail when focused, so you have to keep her kind of out of the fray. But honestly, I think she's just an A tier. I don't think she's as good as, some of these other units. All right, and then Ivy, I do think is S tier. So Ivy is really good with Bonded Shield. So there's a specific setup, but she's like basically one of the few units who can use this setup. So you run Lyn on her. You have Alir on Bonded Shield, because Alir has supports with everyone. And if you understand, like Lucina scales a void based on your supports. So if you throw Lucina on Alir and that's your Bonded Shield unit, Alir gets a ton of XP from Bonded Shielding, power leveling themselves, because it's a male or female, depending on whatever you choose. And you also get all the supports, so you increase your avoid so that enemies can't attack you. So all of the Bonded Shield allies are virtually invincible if their speed is high enough, and Alir is virtually invincible because of the high avoid. But with Ivy on Lyn and Speed Taker, she can counterattack anything, and Magic is really good at killing things. So when she uses Bolganon with Speed Taker, she generally one-rounds things during enemy phase and can completely farm maps and this is insane. Even without Lynn and Speed Taker and all these other things, just using her as a general damage unit that doesn't even have an emblem ring, she still hits really hard and is reasonably reliable. Her accuracy could be better, but it can be improved with engravings. And she also has access to staves. So she is a flying mage with access to staves with decent defensive stats and like medium, sometimes high speed. Not like super high, but like maybe just a little bit above medium speed. So in general, I would say she's A tier, but with the bonded shield strategy, she's S tier. And this completely destroys like tons of maps, like in of itself. And you can 5-man a ton of maps. It's crazy. Or even like 2 to 3-man maps. So it's very powerful. And she uniquely has access to this because she can fly as a mage. If other units could fly as a mage, that would bump them up, but only her and her sister can do this. And she's the more damaging of the two. She also has a pretty good passive that always increases her damage when it triggers, even if just by a little bit. Jade, I would say, is like middle of B tier. She's like a tank. She tanks. Her growths, they're not the best. So 55% HP as a unit who's designed to tank is kind of weird. 35% strength, then 35% dex, 40% defense. So as a tank, you want something that can hit as hard as humanly possible. So 35% strength growth is kind of like average, and her defense growth is above average. Her dex, if her dex and strength are better, I'd put her in A and maybe S tier because you need dex, you need to hit things. And if you have to waste SP or engravings and investment into just landing the hits, it's usually not so easy to use the unit. So I'd put her here. Jean. So this is also a highlight. This unit isn't contentious on my channel, but this is a unit that's like debated as to how good he is. I'm gonna put him in A tier. I would put him in S, but it does require a lot to get him up and running. So for those early chapters, he's just basically going to be healing and chain guarding. Now you can power level him in his own paralog, so that will easily get him to level like 5 to 8 maybe. You just heal villagers, you talk to him, which recruits him in his paralog, and then you just let an enemy stay alive and smack villagers, and then he just heals the villagers. So you want to buy a bunch of healing staves beforehand so that he can burn through them all. Now this can be decent, and it can bring him up to speed, but if you're just playing the game normally, and you don't want to give him special treatment or do XP grinds or anything like that, it is legitimately time consuming to get him up to speed. And he's not going to be popping off until he gets Master Sealed, Second Sealed, and levels up a few times. Like those are the conditions before he becomes S tier. And that's like most of the mid game. The thing with Anna is she starts out at level 5. She's also a backup. You can hand her a compact axe and she can actually hit like 10 to 15 damage a hit and start contributing. You can also easily level her up with Micaiah because she starts out at level 5. So even if you don't use Jean's paralog to level her up, you just hand her Micaiah and she just starts healing things, and she has a higher starting position, and she'll easily get to a better spot than he will. And if you also do certain things, like you can 4-man her paralog, like just have 4 people do her paralog and then feed her kills on her own paralog. That's another way of leveling her up. She can get 1 to 2 levels just from doing that, and then she starts out at level 7. And she's actually has similar stats to Boucheron as a backup, so she's actually not a bad unit. She's more combat ready. She has decent health, so she's actually, her starting position, she's a little bit ahead of him in terms of a start. By the time I got her, he was only level like 3, maybe like 3.5, from just healing and chain guarding, playing the game normally. So it's not like he's very much higher than her, but she's easier to get up and running, I think. And then once you put her on Sage, she's immediately good, like really good. Kagetsu, I would say he's a little bit below Chloe just because you don't get him until mid-game. So he doesn't really help you in the early game at all, but he's still like a really strong unit that has basically no downside. You can throw him on most classes and he'll be really crazy. He has good speed growth, which matters. He also has really good base stats, which really matters. For his strength growth, he does have 30% strength growth, but you could put him on something like Wyvern. He also has 50% dex and 10% build. So he eventually, throughout leveling up, will hit high build levels, at least higher build levels, especially on fixed growth mode, and his dex will keep him accurate. His speed will keep him fast. He does have 40% defense growth, and 30% strength is decent, but he's a fast unit, and his bases are good, so he's really solid. Lapis, honestly, I think she actually might be an A tier, but it requires investment. So I might put her in A tier. So here's what I think her A tier build is, and I'm still actively testing this on my 5th Maddening run, but immediately she's popping off. It's Wyvern Knight. I think she's meant to be a Wyvern Knight. Her speed growth is 55%. Her strength growth is 25%. Wyvern puts her at 45% strength, 60% speed, and she also has 5% build. Wyvern puts her at 10 total, meaning that every 10 level ups, she'll get 1 build on max or on fixed growth. And immediately, once you switch her into Wyvern from Swordmaster, she gets access to either axes or lances. I think lances are the better option, so you can make her a sword lance Wyvern, so she can get like Armor Slayer to deal with enemy armor. She can get Rider's Bane. She can get Steel and Silver Lance. She could potentially run Brave Lance, but she probably wants like the poke damage from an upgraded Steel or Silver Lance. But so far, she's pretty decent. She does have lower speed and dex than Chloe, but Wyvern seems to fix her stats, and she's popping off early game, so she might be an A tier on Wyvern. Some people run her on crit builds, but I find her base damage to be too low to justify doing this, and I think there's better options like Kagetsu for things like that. But on Wyvern, she seems pretty decent. So potentially low A, high B, but it does require second steal, and there's only so many of those early game. Linden, I would say he's like around Citrine. He's just a decent unit. You can run him, like he comes with Thoron. His accuracy is kind of so-so. He doesn't have the best hit rates, and you do get him very late, so it's kind of hard to start investing in him. He does start with 2k SP, which helps, so you can kind of build him a little bit. But I don't think there's really like a huge reason to run him over other units. He's kind of like a good replacement unit. Louis, I would say he's like a solid high B tier. So there's definitely better things than just like physical tanks. You can run physical tanks. There are ways to make them viable and relevant, and in some cases even really strong. But on all of my Maddening runs, Louis consistently falls off as you enter the mid game because the game hands you units that with no investment can do what he does but better. So like Chimera with Ike can tank way better than Louis can, but she also has good enough speed to not get doubled and can tank mages. So it's like you should just run her. I think people get confused about Chimera. They think she's a damage carry. She can be with the right build, but her average use case is that of a tank, and she's meant to be a tank. So, but yeah, I would say he's just decent. He's just solid. He doesn't do like him and Jade are kind of like samey. He just has slightly higher defense. He has slightly higher res. His growths, he does have 40% strength, so he could be a decent halberdier, but he will have low speed and get doubled on counterattack. So there's some issues with that. Mavier, honestly, I think is C. Maybe I can build him better, but you get him, there's a few things. You get him super late, which isn't the main reason. The main reason is he doesn't seem to perform well on his class, like super late. Like you get him very late in the game, and his stats are okay, but they're not going to blow your mind. They're not going to carry your team. He starts with like a flame lance and like a silver or steel great lance. And with better weapons, he does a little bit better, like with different, like an upgraded steel or silver, maybe a brave. I don't think he has the base strength or brave, but he doesn't seem to do much. He does have access to staves because he's a Royal Knight. So he kind of just deals like 10 to 30% of enemy max HP when he hits. And his class is okay. It's just like a kind of utility, low damage class. So it doesn't feel like it pops off very well. And I don't know, maybe you can fix him with he comes with 2.5k SP. So maybe you can fix him with that. But at the best, he might be like a B tier. I didn't find him to be very good. He's not bad though. He just like when you get a unit late game and they're just like average, that's like a bad unit, right? Like if I were to get like an upgraded ETA late game and she's just like kind of similar stats as him, it would still feel the same or any of these units. But I would say he's like C. Marin, I think, is here. I think she's like borderline S tier. If you throw her on Wyvern, she has high enough speed growth that she will pop off on Wyvern. So she has 50% speed growth, 25% strength. She starts off as a Wolf Knight. Wyvern puts her at 45% strength growth. And those extra points of strength matter over time. Like if you put her on Wyvern, immediately you'll see her doing better. She does have, I think, an affinity towards daggers. It's either daggers or swords, but she is, or no, I think it is swords. I could be wrong, but she's best on Wyvern, I think. It still takes advantage of her speed. It puts her at 15% build growth versus 10, which over 20 levels matters, but in general doesn't otherwise. It like increases the rate at which she gets build slightly faster. But the strength from Wyvern and the fact that she's at 55% speed on Wyvern allows her to double a lot of things, and in some cases, one round a lot of things mid game and onward. And I think that's her best class. Otherwise, if you leave her on Wolf Knight, her strength growth remains low, and her damage starts to fall off a cliff as you enter mid or late end game. I'm sorry, late mid game. Pandrea. All right, let me look at his bases again just to see where he starts off, because I feel like a lot of people overhype him. I think he's a solid unit, but I don't think he's as strong as people realize. Yeah, his starting magic is 16. Honestly, I think he's like a low A tier. His passive is really good for hitting and to some degree avoid tanking, but his bases aren't 16 magic on High Priest. Switching to Sage, I think, is like +2. He'd be at 18 base magic when you get him. But that's not bad. It's not blowing my mind. Like if you run Anna, she'll be way higher than that. And I think you get Ivy before then as well, who's also much higher. So where's Ivy at? Ivy's at 17 on a non-upgraded class. Once you put her on her up, you master seal her, she gets, I don't know, 19, maybe 20 magic. And then his speed, 17 speed. So he is reasonably fast. Let's see, what about his growth rates? Let's see to pull these up. Okay, 45% speed. That's pretty decent. So he's 5% more speed than Ivy. Magic growth of 30. He'd be a decent Sage. I think that's what people usually run on him. He does have high build, though. So that gives him a kind of unique thing. He's like one of the few mages that can run heavier tomes. So with investment, maybe he's S tier. It's hard to say. What's his starting build? Let me see this. This will, all right, 5. Or I'm sorry, that's the wrong thing. Or no, it's 8. Okay, so starting build of 8. Maybe he is low S tier. Maybe people are right about him. Because the high build, and then his starting speed of 17, that's not bad. Switching him to Sage, I think you get more speed. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I know you get, it might be the same build, so he might be 8 build. So the 8 build helps him be faster. So for low investment, if you switch him over to Sage, you have a fast unit with good build growth and decent starting build with decent starting magic. Yeah, I think he's probably low S tier. I think that's fair, actually. I don't know about high S tier because I don't know. I feel like these units are better mages for different reasons, for the money and for the flexibility with the Lucina Bond Shield strat. Because the thing with flying Bonded Shield, it's better than grounded Bonded Shield. So if you want to run it on like a Chi Adept, it's better because you can position it wherever you need to aside from impassable tiles. And it opens itself up to more tactics and higher mobility because flyers have unimpeded movement and they also can be out of bounds, which is something other units can't do. So you can just have your bonded shield set up so that enemies that are grounded can't get to the bonder, or you can set it up so you have complete control over what the enemies are doing, which is way stronger. So, okay, Panette. I want to say she's high A tier. I think I originally placed her as like at B, and I was thinking about putting her in S, but she still has durability issues, but she does have access to 2 to 3 really solid builds that can one round on player phase consistently, and then in some cases, one round or tank on enemy phase. So The builds are Brave Axe, Warrior. So you get access to bows. You have a Brave Axe. You one round anything you attack. And then the other build is crit build. You run Ike or Wrath. You can also run Vantage. There's different versions of it, but you can run Killer Axe with an engraving. You can run Wrath. You can run Vantage. You can run Holdout. There's different options for tanking. But those are like the two main archetypes. And then the third one is just like whether or not you're running different emblem rings. So there's like the crit build and the brave build. They're both really solid. There's also the enemy phase tank build that also runs a crit axe. So there's a few pretty solid options. And her ability to just consistently one round on player phase, I would say is almost S tier. But the fact that she has low speed, she usually gets doubled and potentially one rounded. But she does have high health, so that can keep her out of getting one rounded. If you run Ike on her, that can prevent her from getting one rounded. Pop Ike, she takes half damage. You can run Roy on her. Holdout prevents her from getting one rounded. So she has options. So she can be a little bit aggressive, but her aggression allows her to kill things at a rate that other units have trouble doing. So she can just kill two things with a dancer, and that usually prevents her from being able to get attacked. So, all right, Rosado, I would say kind of like medium B tier. His growths are good, but he does seem to level up slow. This is like what people have been reporting, that he does level up slower than Goldmary due to high internal level. This may or may not be the case. As far as I can tell, he does level up maybe slightly slower or around the same speed as her. He does enter your team with 1800 SP, which is pretty solid. And Axe Wyvern, I feel like, is bad for him because of his build. His build isn't bad. It's just that he needs, I think, lances. I think he wants to stay on lances so that he can take advantage of their lighter weight so that he can actually double. He actually has pretty good growth rate. So he has 45% strength and 45% speed, and also 40% dex. So he has pretty decent growths for dealing damage and hitting accurately. There could be an argument to be made that he's an A tier unit, but he does require investment. And by the time you get him, you probably have a lot of solid units already, so he won't really stand out among them. He'll just be like a decent unit that you could run. And that's how he was for me in my runs. Saphir, honestly, I think she's like high C tier. For like, you get her on chapter 19, and her stats are decent, but her accuracy is kind of bad. And she also doesn't really come with anything too good. Like, you do get a Brave Axe from her, but she doesn't have like a bow on her already, which kind of is annoying. You have to like hand her a bow. But she doesn't really contribute a whole lot. She has like accuracy issues. Even if you put hit plus 15 on her, so she still has like accuracy issues. And her strength, I think her starting strength is like 24, which by chapter 19 is not very good on a warrior. That's not that good. I can double check the strength. Saphir, yeah, 24 strength. She does have high health, and she also has insanely high build, but high build doesn't matter if your speed isn't very high. Her starting speed is 19. She does have some potential to hit decent stats. Let me check out her growth rate. So 30% speed. Yeah, so she's going to have a hard time being fast. So even though her starting speed is above average, for chapter 19, that's not that good. Like 19 speed by chapter 19 is not high enough to start doubling. You'd have to put in some work to get something out of her, and her strength isn't that high. Panette, by comparison, when she joins, let's see, where is she? Panette's starting strength is 25, and that's in chapter 13. So yeah, it's not even close, dude. It's not even close. Panette starts with higher strength way earlier and is just a better unit by far. But she definitely, I don't even want to say B tier because it's so late game that it's just work to get her doing anything. And you have to waste all of her SP to like fix her issues. So I don't think she's very good. Sadal, probably the best unit in the game. You could put him in SS tier or God tier. He's the best unit because not only does he refresh your units, but he AoE heals within 2 tiles every single turn. And if you run quality time on him, he also chip heals adjacent. So he has like 2 forms of healing, and he also stat boosts. So he's literally your best unit plus more shit. Like he's your best unit plus other things. So he's the best unit in the game. And when you run Canter on him, especially he easily hits Canter plus by like chapter 22 to 23. Once he hits Canter plus, he has 3 movement after dancing, which is crazy. So he can reposition to like min max and optimize his quality time healing and his curious dance healing. Chimera, I would say she's like, hold on, it's like weird. All right. I would say she is like here. I would say she's like high A tier. She's actually a bruiser tank. Now, she has a higher internal level than her retainers for some reason. But after like 2 chapters, like 1 to 2 chapters, she starts to level up normally. And at that point, she starts, being fine. But if you upgrade her to Picket immediately and leave Ike on her, she'll be a solid tank. And you can also unlock like speed +3 cheaply on Lynn, and that'll put her into doubling range of some enemies. And her main use cases, I would say, are enemy phase tanking and counterattacking with Sandstorm, like on a Javelin, to double slower enemies and then counterattack them and trigger Sandstorms, including archers and mages, because she's one of the few tanks that can actually tank mages because she has decent res and she does not get doubled. Both of those things factor in, and plus you factor in the half damage on Ike. She can easily tank small groups of enemies and kill a lot of them or put a lot of serious damage from just sandstorm triggering a few times. She also has a hyper aggressive, arguably S tier build where you run Sigurd on her and then a Brave Lance, and you increase the Brave Lance's damage. You get to like +3 to +5 throughout a run, and she just runs up in one rounds thing with Sandstorm. But she also has high enough speed that she'll actually double enemies with a Brave Lance and will not get doubled herself, and she still is tanky. So on Sigurd, she's kind of like a tanky bruiser DPS, and on Ike, she is a tanky enemy phase DPS. But either way, you can manipulate Sandstorm through magnitude, like just having a bunch of things attack you and counterattacking an enemy phase. You can manipulate Sandstorm by Brave Weaponing, and you can also, like the thing with Sigurd is it also scales her dex and gives her build, so it works perfectly with her Sandstorm ability. Vander, I think he's the worst unit in the game. He has a very high internal level, so that means he levels up very slowly. If you have him get too many kills early game, he's just stealing XP away from better units like Chloe or Alir, and potentially Lapis, depending on how well she scales. Fram and Saline and Louis are all better units by far, so they should be getting your XP, not Vander. I don't think it's worth it for him to get any XP. He also has bad base stats and bad growth rates, so he has literally nothing good going on for him aside from him being able to tank for a few chapters early on. Vale, I would say, is like high B tier. She has low health. You do get her with 2.5k SP, similar to Mavier. But her problem is that you get her so late that it's hard to build her. And she has a weird class that uses daggers and tomes. So it's basically like a bad sage because the daggers she's good with are magical daggers, which are essentially the same thing as using a tome. So she just has like a redundant class. She is dragon type, but there's not too many emblem rings that really pop off with dragon type. Like there's so many non-dragon type emblem ring uses that the fact that dragon type gets access to all the emblem rings abilities like seems good on paper, but I think in practice it's not really that strong. Like the main thing is like Corrin, you get access to all the different tile manipulation, but Bonded Shield is better than all of it. Like it literally can farm, it can kill like 20 enemies in a row. Like you can't, you just can't compete with that. It's just simply better. Yeah, so like on Dragon, she has kind of like medium speed. It's hard to get her to double. You have to dump a lot of resources into her out of the blue if you want to start using her seriously. She's basically just like bad Anna. So if you use Anna throughout an entire run and then you get Vale, like Anna has better health, better magic, better speed, can double consistently, already has her build set, has already made you like a few thousand, maybe like to like 30, 40,000 gold if you put Luck and Byleth on her. So like she's basically just bad Anna, kind of similar to Fram. I would say they're both just like bad Anna, the unit. with heavy investment, like you can't really invest in her because she's a high level. Like she's not going to level up very fast, and the only thing she would level up on are high level paralogs and mainline missions, and there's not that many of those left. So by the time you get her, she's not like a hard carry. She's just okay. Yunaka, I'm gonna say like here. I'd say she's like middle of A tier. She requires she requires a lot of kills in order to pop off. So like she's not like Chloe where you just hand her a steel lance and she'll just go one round everything and start carrying your early game. You have to set up kills for her to some degree and have her get a bunch of kills, and you have to upgrade a weapon that you know you're throwing out, which feels stupid. You have to upgrade her iron dagger. Now you can turn it into a steel, and that's debatable. It's debatable as to whether or not that's worth it, because turning it into a steel is more expensive than just plus oneing it, which puts it at steel based stats basically. But you have to upgrade an iron dagger, which is largely a waste of resources early on, and you eventually get Zelkov, who's just better than her in every way. So you're usually better off investing in other things, but if you do run her early, she can still avoid tank and hold some angles. But there's different there's so many early game strategies and ways of beating these maps that you don't need her avoid tanking, but you can use it as a tool. But you just have to understand that you're siphoning away XP from other units like Alir, Chloe, Anna, and whoever else you want to run long term to use her. She's kind of an XP hog. And she also has a hard time reclassing because she needs to hit level 21 before she can master seal. So you basically have to second seal her into a different base class and level her up to 10, or have her hit level 21, both of which are hard conditions to meet. So she's kind of stuck on Thief. So if you want to use her on something else, that's a problem. But also on Thief, her damage can fall off and it can be not the best. And it does feel terrible when she doesn't double, because her damage is not that good on single hit pokes. Like steel weapons, like steel sword and steel lance, steel axe, these hit really hard if they don't double. Her daggers do not hit very hard if they don't double. She also has low base strength. So that's like, you have low base strength, you have to upgrade this thing. It's still good, but it's not going to carry your playthrough. And in some cases, it can siphon XP off of other units. Zelkov, I would say he's low S. For zero investment, he's good. For zero, like the game hands you him and he's just really good. There's nothing you have to do. You can just use him normally. He starts off at level 17, which is much closer if you want to reclass him. He can reclass into some things, or you can just keep him on Thief. But you don't have to do anything, and he just starts off viable. So, well, not even just viable. He starts off pretty crazy, and he has a very good passive that reduces enemy hit rates. So, pretty strong. I think that's everyone. I'll put Sami. People are mad I put Sami in A tier, but I'm going to put him in A tier again just because it makes this nice little line. But this is my tier list for Maddening after 400 hours. Some of this might change. She might go down if it turns out her on Wyvern falls off mid-game. But right now, her on Wyvern seems really strong, and that's the use case for her. He definitely has a rough start, so you could argue he's like B tier. But I think this is accurate, at least for me. If you have any arguments as to who should move up or down and why, I'm open to hearing them. If the arguments revolve around using DLC, that's fine, and you're probably correct, but I don't run DLC, so this is without DLC. But if the arguments revolve around like overinvestment in the unit to the point where you're borderline breaking the game or exploiting the game, I don't think that's a very strong case. But if it's just something like, oh, just use this emblem ring on them and then they start to pop off, like I'm open to strategy, feedback and stuff like that. But these units feel like a wasted effort, and these ones are tough to get going, and these ones are just decent. So, but overall, I would say most units are pretty strong, and only a few are hard to get going, and even fewer in terms of the bulk are pretty hard to use. Maybe Vander belongs in like F tier. Maybe D tier should be. Maybe he's actually C, and he's a D. He's like F tier, and then these are D. I think that's fair. All right. So definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. Feel free to drop a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.